Hey guys, what's up? Coach Justin with PNW BJJ, and I'm super excited about today's episode here at Certified Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in University Place, Washington, near Tacoma, with Coach and founder Paul Boudreaux. Thank you for being here, brother.
Thanks,
I appreciate
for having
it. Really looking forward to what you have to show us today, technique-wise, and your opinions on all things BJJ. For those of you who live in the area close to Tacoma, Washington, or along the I-5 corridor, if you're traveling through here, they have an open mat every Sunday that's open to everyone. I would highly recommend coming to check them out. They have a crew of absolute killers here, all nice people. Really welcoming. They will work with all levels, but you will get tough, really technical roles in. So definitely come check that out. And they're up on social media, on YouTube and Instagram, so make sure to give them a shout out there. Do you want to say a little bit about your own Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey as far as what brought you to the art, and maybe a little bit about what you guys offer and do here at the school, and some of your competition accolades or achievements?
Absolutely. Yeah, I am Paul Boudreaux. I am owner-operator, certified martial arts here. I've been a head grappling instructor for about 5 years now. I originally started martial arts, had no idea what Jiu-Jitsu was. In my professional life, I was spending a lot of time in the legal field in some situations that were sometimes precarious, and was like, I spent a lot of time in grad school getting in shape, and I was like, I still think I would be less than useless in a fight. So I should probably learn how, just maybe a little bit of self-defense. I think that's how a lot of people come to it as, like, whether your kids are being picked on and you want them to have some self-defense, or just me personally as a young 20, mid-20s, was like, I think I should probably know how to defend myself, just based on the world that we live in, and really for my own self-improvement and edification. And so one of my bosses at the time at the firm I was working for was actually next door neighbors, worked right across the street from Brian Johnson. So he runs the Academy of Brian Johnson, Kickboxing Academy. Not to be confused with the Jiu-Jitsu Brian Johnson, who I didn't know there was one until many years later. Both great people, but Brian Johnson is definitely a striking coach, and that's originally why I went in there, was to learn kickboxing. And I was just like, kickboxing, that's what I know for self-defense, didn't know much about Jiu-Jitsu, and started taking classes once or twice a week. And then I decided to do my first tournament after like 3 months of starting jiu-jitsu. So I went and did the Revolution, one of the big local tournaments here. I think I lost my very first match ever in the last 10 seconds. And then I won my second match ever, like 13-0. And then I think I ended up placing bronze in nogi at my very first tournament after only 3 months of training. Wow. And since then, I kind of just, it snowballed and had taken over my life. I liked competition and training. And so I was training, twice a week, and then I was training in my buddy's garage on Sundays, and then I started cross-training at another gym up in Fife on Saturdays. So then I was training 4 days a week. And then after a couple of years, my old coach had some health issues, and so he actually had to retire. And Brian's was kind of left, I got promoted really quickly up to the level of brown belt. And so I started coaching really early on, and when my coach retired, we were kind of just left without someone there because we no longer had a resident black belt. And so Brian's like, hey, you've done a lot of work with the team, and there really isn't anyone else who can take over. And so I kind of took over there about 4 or 5 years ago. And so then I was coaching 4 days a week because I wanted to have, to build up the legitimacy of the program there. And it's hard to do that on just like 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. And so, and then I was cross-training the other 3 days a week, like doing my own training as opposed to training with the team. And then one day I woke up and I'm like, I'm training 7 days a week, or coaching or teaching and doing jiu-jitsu 7 days a week. And so I was like, I should probably just try to do this full time. And so, we had everything that happened with the pandemic. And so that a lot of that was on hold, and for the last 4 years of my competitive career, I've really focused on coaching and teaching and training and getting ready to compete for ADCC, which happened just this last weekend. It's what we call our Olympics of grappling. And what I like most about it is it's very democratic, and that you don't have to be a black belt, you just have to be the best, right? And that's what I was like, I'm not a black belt yet, but I think I can go out there and compete with the best, and I only have so many years in my competitive career left. now that I'm in my 30s, which is old for the ADCC, unfortunately. And so, I have done 4 ADCC trials. I made it to the round of 64 this last year. Lost to one of Wagner Rocha's guys. And jiu-jitsu has been a blessing for me in my ability to travel, across the country and across the world, and travel to Brazil to train with my now affiliate for the Caioterra affiliates. And it's just something that has come to mean everything to me. I really enjoy all the aspects of it, the difficulty of it, the fact that you're always learning, the fact that you get to meet new amazing communities. By and large, most of my experiences in jiu-jitsu have been wildly positive, and so that's really what motivated me. Is I wanted a place to do it full time and coach and teach full time, in addition to working down for Brian's. And at some point, you kind of have to work for yourself if you're going to make it in this world, as opposed to just teaching for someone else. And so that's what I did.
Awesome, man. No, that's really cool. I know you had kind of a meteoric rise, and a big part of that was you compete a lot, and you train a lot.
I train a lot.
For those of you who don't know, I think this guy, you got to hold like 3 or 4 records just for the amount of rounds spent in a year, the time spent rolling on the mat or whatever other achievement. This guy's always rolling.
Yeah, I recently completed 10,000 rounds in 754 days. On that, me and my wrestling coach did 32 consecutive hours for over 332 rounds consecutively.
Dang.
So I think both of those are world records. They haven't been certified by Guinness because they wanted $7,000, so I didn't send them that money. But if anyone wants to challenge that, I'm happy to take on any challenges to that.
No, that's amazing. I guess that begs the question then to my mind. In your view, how important is competition? Because I've heard the argument from a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. There are different aspects to jiu-jitsu. There's the competition jiu-jitsu, there's the self-defense jiu-jitsu, there's like the art of it. In terms of your progress, how important is competing? Can somebody really progress without that aspect, without ever stepping on the mat to do a true competition?
You will absolutely get better without competing. The thing that my original coach always talked to me about, and that I think reigns true, is competing keeps your jiu-jitsu honest. Okay? And what that means to me is we all get into grooves with people that we know, right? So you could have, there are some gyms that are more blessed than others. If like down in HQ, they live the dream, right? Kaio's HQ lives the dream. You go there for the 6:30 class, there will be 100 people on the mats at 6:30, which I think is like every jiu-jitsu instructor's dream. And so, like, if you can get looks like that, you're getting a wide variety. But for most of the local clubs, even the bigger schools around here, you're going to have, and you only have, if you're a regular day person, or a strong hobbyist, not quite professional level, you're going to have the same 10, 15, 20 guys that you train with all the time. And that's great. You will get better relative to those guys. But you learn people's strengths, their weaknesses. You know what game that they play. Are they a half guard player or whatever? And maybe you're at a specific school that has a certain historic style. Carlson Gracie is very top pressure, heavy, smash pass, right? And nothing wrong with that. But that might be the only kind of style that you see throughout the course of your career as a hobbyist. So by bringing legitimacy to your jiu-jitsu, or keeping it honest, as we say, when you go out to competitions, you face the unknown. You have heightened anxiety. You face more of the fight or flight response that I think is going to be more practical in a real-world self-defense scenario. And you're going to learn where your holes are based on things you just might not have seen before. So I think that I always tell people competition is not required, right? Like I get that most people aren't wired that way, and you do not have to reap the benefits of jiu-jitsu and go out and compete. But just to test yourself and to keep your jiu-jitsu honest, I think going out and doing just a few competitions just throughout the course of your career is going to help you address some things you might be missing in the training room that you just wouldn't see otherwise. So that's kind of my take on competition. I love to compete, and I like that aspect. But that's also just how I'm hardwired. I've kind of been like that my whole life. And so not everyone is like that. I definitely appreciate that.
Sure. No, I think I would agree with with all of that. Well, and then, so furthering on as far as like advice to people who might be starting, I like to ask this question to anybody who comes onto the channel. If there was somebody who just started and say they're brand new to not just jiu-jitsu, but they don't have any real athletic background to base their understanding of things on, or maybe they're just thinking about starting training, what advice would you impart to them, or words of wisdom or caution or whatever? How would you best go about helping them to facilitate the start of their journey?
That has been kind of the benefit of where I have been in my career, is I have worked more with white belts and lower belts than with upper belts for most of my career, just by happenstance, the way things have happened. Of course, I've had to travel and been able to travel and get lots of exposure. But my day-to-day training is I'm working mostly with brand new people, and so I deal with that a lot. The biggest thing for me that I always tell people is that the first 6 months are going to be the hardest, right? Especially when you're in a competitive room, because you're just going to get beat up. You're going to get smashed a lot. It's going to be very frustrating, and you're going to get, it's that persistence muscle. You're going to have to flex your persistence muscle, and that's when people wash out, is they're not persistent because they don't like losing, right? We always go back to having to deal with your ego and self-assessment and awareness. And what I always tell people is the real magic of jiu-jitsu is going to start for you after your first 6 months of consistent training. So when you get 6 months of consistent training, and that could be 2 to 3 times a week, which isn't anything crazy, it's just the consistency, right? And some people can't train that much, so it might take you a year to get that amount of training. But whatever it is, when you get essentially roughly 6 months of 2 to 3 times a week, and then what's going to happen is you're not going to see the improvement relative to the people around you who are also consistent. What's going to happen is someone's going to walk in off the street, they're brand new white belt, and you're going to feel like you have a new superpower, right? Yeah. And that's when it kicks in, and that's when I think the love of it really happens. So if you're really struggling, my advice is to just be consistent. As kind of blasé as that is, I literally went around to every black belt I could find in the world, and I'm like, okay, everyone's gone, what's the secret? Everyone just says keep showing up, and that's dumb. What is the secret? And it comes back to that because it truly is just the growth and consistency over time. Nothing will beat consistency.
Agreed. No, I think that's profound. Further downstream from that, then, if you have somebody who's a little bit more along in their journey, they're a purple belt or brown belt or black belt, and they're thinking about opening up their own academy, what words of advice or caution? Just don't do it.
Yeah.
What would you tell that person?
I think the best thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that the love and the passion is absolute, and that it's not going, and that you can, my undergraduate background is in business and in economics, and you just have to appreciate that about 80% of businesses fail in the first 2 years. And so you're now an entrepreneur. You now are what we call linchpin owners. So everything lives by you and dies by you, especially if you do it the way that I did, which is kind of doing it completely on my own. Other people, and part of that is just because of my life experience. I've had a lot of unfortunate loss in my life, from family members to just a lot of things that have happened, where it's like if I want to do something, like I have to go for it. Like that's just kind of what my personality is. And that's not really necessarily the best way to do it. I have had a lot of support to people that have come to me over the years, and so my first absolute piece of advice would be make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who can fill in the gaps, right? Because I train all day, every day, and if I get sick, I have to find a way to get coverage, or we have to close down, and I have to be very communicative and support it. Make sure that my students are well taken care of, and that everything is in line, so there's not a lot of business interruption, because I would say that's what it is. So make sure that you can build a foundation of support, and go back to the history of jiu-jitsu. Is a lot of it starts in like people's garages, and so if you're afraid, right? I've also had other opportunities. I'm surrounded by people who are very supportive. My financial decisions aren't going to negatively affect them no matter what happens. So if this crashes and burns, it really is only on me. And so that is also very liberating and supremely stressful. So I hope that you can take on that stress and expect to take on that stress, and that every day you're going to be worried and concerned, and you have to do everything. You have to do the advertising and the budgeting and figuring all that stuff out. So make sure that you surround yourself with people. And if you really want to do it but don't want to take those risks, try to start small. There are tons and tons of people who have started. I have lots of friends who, they did it more the correct way, which is they start in their garage and they have 3 or 4 people who come regularly, and then they bring friends. They don't even necessarily charge anything at the beginning, and so it's a lot easier to get people to show up when it's free. And you have people that form your kind of core student base, because that's the other thing is when people come in, they want to see people on the mats who are also doing it. So you have what's known as the social proof. And so I'd say that if you're afraid and you can't just take the leap right away, is start small. Don't feel bad that you have to start in a garage. Literally, that's the history of Gracie Jiu Jitsu.
Sure.
So just know that you're just following in the footsteps of how our forebears did it before us.
Awesome. Well, and as an adjunct to that, then, as far as fostering a good gym culture, right? Because I think all of us in Jiu Jitsu, we want this to remain functional and something that is really usable as a self-defense art, and in addition to all those other things like the social aspects and all that, there's a lot of good things, myriad of good things about Jiu Jitsu. So we want it to remain tough and usable, but at the same time, like, it could benefit a wide variety of people, not just like your aspiring elite athletes, so like your older people or your little kids. And so running that balance between not making it so nerfed and soft and kid gloved that it's still usable, but not making it just a gym bro culture type of place. How do you, what are some keys to maintaining that sort of good gym culture?
The biggest thing, I think, I think it's not surprising, but it comes down to having that structure and having a conversation about expectations. And I have set hours that set things happen, right? Like open mat happens at a specific time every week. Our morning classes, the first class is a foundational class that anybody can come into. The following class is a more advanced class. The noon class is a structured nogi class, right? The 4 o'clock class that I have is an all ages fundamental. And so I have that so parents can come in with their kids and they can learn how to move and get the functional stuff, but it's not super advanced, right? And then it's like, if you want more, then you can come back at a 6:30 advanced class, or you can come to a morning class, or you can pay for a private lesson, or you can, heaven forbid, you show up for the Saturday competition training, which we are notorious for, but we tell everyone in advance, right? We tell people, don't come if you're not ready to suffer on Saturday. And it's a different world on Saturday, right? And I've had that experience, training at HQ down with Kaio. Kaio is Kaio Terra, 12-time world champion. He is just as sweet as can be. He's funny, sarcastic. But if you go to, I think the competition classes usually happen at 1 p.m. And those are the pros, right? So it's in the middle of the day. So it's college students or Masons there, people who are professionals.
Yeah.
And it's a different environment. It's a different world. It's not the 6:30 class where it's the PayPal, executives that are coming in and getting a nice friendly roll in the morning. It's we're trying to kill each other at 1 o'clock, and we're going to do that for an hour, or an hour and a half, or however long it takes. And so just knowing that what you're in for and building that expectation of what you expect. If you come in on a Saturday around here, everyone knows. Everyone, not just our school, everyone knows what our Saturdays are like, or have heard stories about what our Saturdays are like. And you have to be ready for it. And then Sundays are much more free flowing. You can take rounds off. You can talk. We spend hours talking afterwards.
Sure.
And so I think part of it is just meeting those expectations, having structure, and keeping open communications with saying, hey, if you want to go to the next level, this is what you're going to have to do. But if you just want to come in and roll with your kids at 4 o'clock and learn the technique and have fun family time, we have that too.
Cool. No, that's awesome. Well, this is a question I wasn't planning to ask, but I'm curious. Congrats on the affiliation. That's really, really cool. How important, when you're first starting up, you're a new gym owner and you don't necessarily have that affiliation yet. Is that something that's super important to have off the bat? Is that something you work towards?
I would say that your affiliation to the standard person who's coming in off the street isn't going to be the most important thing. Because they might not know any better, right? If they come here or they go to any number of schools that are now around the road. For me, personally, it's literally just a personal decision. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. At the end of the day, there are, and I won't name any specifically, but there are some affiliations that are just corporate branding, which is fine. Absolutely. This, at the end of the day, it's a business, and if you want to buy into their corporate branding and their business, 100% go for it. As long as that works for you, both philosophically and financially, you should make that decision. And so I think that what brought me to the Kyotera affiliation is that it is more narrow. It's kind of a little more, I don't want to say it's more elite, but they are more discerning about who they left in, and that's one of the conversations that we had when you go through a whole approval process, and they do background checks and all. They have very high standards, and that was the biggest thing for me. That's what I personally have been very fortunate to develop a friendship with Kyo and his team over the years, just on an interpersonal basis. And then, I decided that I needed to make a clear path forward for my black belt, and I wanted to do it at the highest standard. And so that's what led me. And so I think that's the decision that you have to make for yourself. And I've seen many people in the community make those decisions, and it seems like they've been good decisions, right? It's really hard to kind of, build your own brand. And at the end of the day, for me, it's about legitimacy. And so you want to make sure that you're buying into a brand that's going to be recognized and legitimized. And for however your feelings are and any controversies there might be, the IBJJF, I think, is still one of the most well-respected and timely honored organizations. And every big organization has its difficulties. But if you want to be recognized internationally as a legitimate school, you have to be recognized through, at a minimum, the IBJJF. And the IBJJF has very stringent things that they do to promote people to black belt. And so it's that same thing. It's a quality control thing for me, and that I get to not only work with people that I like and respect, but I know are going to hold the highest standard. And I think, for me, I felt like that was the best decision, not just for my own career, but hopefully for the future. Hopefully I have a lot of students, and it's the best thing for their career as well. And so I think those are the things that you have to consider when you're looking at an affiliation.
Cool. No, that's, awesome. All right, I appreciate that answer. Well, then, thinking about things like legitimacy, belts in Jiu Jitsu, that's something I wanted to get your take on. Is it just silliness? Is it something that has real meaning? And I guess to frame this a little bit better, I think at a practical level, there's some recognition by all of us that belts should reflect your ability to roll. So if you can hang with purple belts regularly, you're probably around a purple belt, brown with brown, black with black, and so on. But to some degree, there's some exceptions to that. If somebody gets injured and they're out for a year after a surgery or something, we don't demote them and say, well, you can't hang with the blue belts anymore, you're back to white belt. Or as people get older, nobody looked at Elio Gracie, in his 80s and said, well, I don't know that you can compete actively, so we're just going to bump you back down. Like that would not be something that would go over well, and nor should it. So it has to mean something more than just your ability to roll on the mats with elite athletes. What's your take on what it means or what it should mean?
This is an excellent question, and something I've given considerable thought to over the years, and also played into the idea of affiliation. Again, just personal story. I was fortunate enough to be able to travel to Brazil and train in Rio de Janeiro a few years ago. Going to be going back again this year in December, and I got to meet and train with Kyo's original instructor, Master Paulo Marcuccio Strauss, who's a 9th degree red belt, who's in his, I think he's like 73 or 74 or something, and he still teaches every single day, as far as I know. And the belt denotes really two things in my mind, at least. Number one is it does have a fair representation of skill level, but two, it is as much a representation of skill level as it is a commitment to the sport in general. And when you look definitionally on how IBJJF looks at it, if you look at, I always tell people, there are 5 colored belts, and don't worry about anything else because you're not going to live long enough to reach those other ones. He has, I think it is the highest designation you can get and not the original member of the Gracie family. I think the Gracie families have kind of reserved rightfully so. The 10th degree, in judo, it'd be like a dan status, right? But he's essentially has reached as high as you can go, and you get that after, I believe, 40 plus years of consistent teaching at the black belt level. So I think that time comes for us all, right? It is a fact of life. Time comes for us all. So at some point in your career, you are going to have to make a transition, especially if you're a black belt. If you get your black belt early, you're going to have to make a transition from being a real world-class competitor to being maybe a master's competitor, which again, nothing wrong with that, and being a coach, right? And it's the service to jiu-jitsu, I think, is where we get into our second, third, fourth, fifth degrees, all the way up to coral belts and the red belt. And so I think that's the appropriate way to look at it, is we all have a finite timeline of being the best competitor that we can be, and we have no idea what that timeline is going to be. It tends to be once you get over the age of 40, that seems to be a good cutoff, but what Rafa Lovato just made it to the finals in his 40s, so maybe we push that boundary a little bit. But at some point, you're going to reach an age where it's about service to the community, and I think the black belt is going to represent that as much as it is your ability to just beat up the 21-year-old kid.
Love it. No, that's awesome. That's a great answer. All right, and so the controversial question, gi versus no gi, which has been a debate as long as I've been doing jiu-jitsu and before that. What do you see, if any, value in somebody engaging with both of those relative to their goals, I guess? I know your school does a lot of no gi, but you also have competed gi, and you have students that compete in the gi. So is there value in training in both, and what do you like out of the two, just on a personal level?
Yes to the gi. All right, next question.
Yeah, perfect. That was the right answer.
You're right. So interestingly enough, this was something that came up during the my affiliation process as well. Is I agree with this, that if you want to say you are a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, then you have to train in the gi. I think historically that is what it is. So I think that's a conversation you have to have with yourself as far as, what is it that I'm doing? Let's just take a look historically at people that have been deemed successful in Jiu-Jitsu. Gordon Ryan has a black belt in the gi, has trained a lot in the gi. Is that his primary focus? No, it wouldn't make sense for it to be. But he absolutely could compete against some of the best in the world in the gi. I don't think there's any question of that. If you look to, people who consider one of the greatest, Roger Gracie, very, very gi heavy. Look at what happened this last weekend. Felipe Andrew, known as a gi competitor, made it to the final rounds of the CJI. Let's look at MMA. Alex Pereira, one of the greatest fighters of all time, recently seen sporting a gi, training in the gi. Max Holloway, I would say, one of the great fighters of our time, recently seen sporting his brown belt in the gi. So I think I have always been a fan in the gi. This is something people say to me, that, we look at your Instagram page. It looks like all you do is no-gi. I actually still teach more gi than I do no-gi every week. I teach more gi classes than I teach no-gi. I started in the gi. I never wrestled. My first 2.5, 3 years of competition were 100% gi focused. I only ever did no-gi because it was only like $40 more. I never trained no-gi. I never ever trained no-gi. Until I decided to commit and actually try to go and compete at ADCC. So I think that's the other consideration, is I still would train in the gi multiple times a week, but I would just shift the amount of sparring that I was doing from gi to no-gi to focus and be no-gi heavy. And what I always say about the gi is going to do several things. Number one is it's going to make your escaping better. You have to learn to be more methodical. So when you get into like side control and people are doing knee on belly and they take your back, it is harder to escape in the gi because you can't just be sweaty and turn, right? You have to learn more precise technique. Number two, for me, it's about stratagem, right? You want to, I readily admit I'm not the most athletic person that's ever lived, And, as one of the few natural athletes in the sport, you have to rely. I want to turn jiu-jitsu into a thinking game. I want it to be, that kind of idea of having the chess match, and I want it to be be defined by strategy. And what the Ghee is going to do is it's going to give you an added layer of complexity, so you have another variable to think about, and so I think that helps you strategically. And the third thing about the Ghee, which I think is the most important, is you're going to have to suffer more. Most people are like, oh, this thing's so hot and it's itchy and I don't like it. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're here for. It's you're flexing that suck, right? This muscle it's gonna suck, and I got to get through that. And the Ghee definitely forces you to do that. So I think that those distinct advantages are why you should do at least some Ghee training. I remember. There's been a lot of MMA fighters that talk about that. And if you're doing MMA, I also think that you have to do what you're going to compete in to get better at it. So if you're only going to do no-gi competitions, then you still have to spend most of your time doing no-gi. That makes sense to me, right? But there are added benefits of doing it in the gi, which is going to be everything that I outlined before. I also think it's just fun. I like judo, so we do a lot of takedowns. We are known, it is against the rules of the gym to openly pull guard in here, and so you have to learn takedowns, and I really like judo takedowns. I watched the Olympics for judo, and that was awesome. And that, again, that's the history of the sport of jiu-jitsu, is learning the ground techniques of judo and then mastering them. And so I think it's important to learn takedowns. Specifically, I always coach my students to say, I would prefer you to fail a takedown and go into guard as opposed to just straight pulling guard. And that's just a personal belief of mine. Everyone believes something different. And jiu-jitsu, at the end of the day, is a game, so some people just don't want to learn takedowns, and I respect that. I respectfully disagree, but I absolutely respect that. Guys under the CTA banner, they pull guard all the time. They're some of the best guard players in the world, too. And so, absolutely, that's a path to victory. And so I'm very in favor of the gi. I teach the gi all the time, and I'll always be a diehard gi person, even though our Instagram profile might lead you to believe otherwise.
You heard it here first. No, that's an awesome answer. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you
Absolutely.
again.
Thanks so much.
Looking forward to seeing what you have to show us. All right.